Can you help me debunk some of the myths that sometimes Section 8 tenants are just full of guns and drugs and drama? Like, what has been your experience with Section 8 tenants compared to market rate or cash tenants?
Well, guns and drugs is an immediate violation of the Section 8 HUD rules. So I don't run into much, if any, of that at all. Cash tenants still destroy homes 4 to 5 times greater than Section 8 tenants do. That's why I don't do cash tenants anymore. A cash tenant doesn't have anything to lose but their security deposit. Potentially in small claims court, Section 8 tenants run the risk of losing their voucher, which means they lose the revenue that they have in order to have a place to stay. In general, having the thuggish lifestyle, however you want to describe it, there's not a whole lot of that I see or hear about in Section 8 in the Detroit market. So for those out there that are hearing horror stories about Section 8, you got it backwards. The horror stories with cash tenants.
In my years of owning houses, I've only had one get trashed. You know, you're going to have that whether you're in low-end housing or not. If your houses are just a bit above the neighborhood, people realize that and they want to take care of it. I'm not saying that's the case always, but in my experience, that's what it's been. And the last time I had a tenant move out, that house, we had maybe 2 hours worth of work to do in there and send a cleaner in, and it was like back up for rent the next day. It was fantastic. I couldn't believe it. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to happen all the time. I'm not saying that you're going to see that even most of the time. But when you're making that extra effort and you're doing your due diligence, you know, screening and whatnot, it's a pretty attainable goal, I guess you would say.
So that goes for everybody. You know, tenants are tenants. Some are bad, some are good. And that's really what it is at the end of the day. Me personally, every single Section 8 tenant I've come across, which is limited, I'm no expert in the field by any means, but each one of them are just good people. They take care of their homes. They have children. You know, it's their space. They go to work, they go home. They want to relax there. That's their home. If things go wrong, you as a landlord have to address that right away in the best way possible. And it's really just the communication with your Section 8 tenants or any tenants gets the job done. But I've never come across a bad tenant. Like, no one's being malicious or anything.
So I realized there's another group of Section 8 tenants, which I call Tier 1 tenants. I took the time to understand these people. Who are these people? What do they want? Where do they want to live? Where do they don't want to live? Who do they want to rent to? Who do they don't want to rent to? So I said, who's this customer? Who are these people? And that was the game changer for me, is realizing that, hey, if I can appeal to these people, they're going to take care of my properties. They're going to be pleasant to deal with. They're going to pay their rent, and they're going to stay a long, long time. If I'm going to survive between now and when I exit, I've got to attract people like who will take care of your house, pay the rent, and all that kind of stuff. It's truly a joy to be a housing provider because you're making a huge difference in people's lives. These folks are being displaced, and so they're a casualty of gentrification. So what I do is I allow them to stay. So now they're a beneficiary of gentrification. They can be in a nice house in a nice area. Their kids can go to nice schools, and they can do all those things which ordinarily they wouldn't have the opportunity. And they're not paying all the rent. They're only paying maybe $300 or $400, $500. And so they would love to stay 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Whereas a market renter, it's unlikely that that's going to happen.
Let's talk about some of those myths. A Section 8 tenant will come in and destroy your unit and ruin it. That's by far the most cliche, and it's the most popular. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is if you have a Section 8 tenant that comes in on a housing choice voucher and they destroy your unit, you make one phone call to their caseworker, they will send somebody down, look at the house, and they will start the process. As soon as they destroy one of those units, they lose that voucher forever, and they can never rent underneath the Section 8 program again. And we don't deal with that, rarely ever. We do hundreds of properties a year. We might have 1 or 2 instances where we face something like that. It's extremely, extremely low, under 1%, because a lot of these people, they don't want to lose that voucher. That is myth number 1. The second myth is they're going to bring in guns, drugs, booze, and they're going to turn your house into a frat house on steroids, trap house, if you will. So what happens is once a year, sometimes twice a year, sometimes once every 18 months, Section 8 will do a random inspection on our units. And if they come in and they see anything that is illegal, anything nefarious, they will write that up and put the tenant at risk of losing their voucher. So these inspections are actually great for both the tenant and the owner. They make sure that nothing bad is going on at the unit. There's not 10 pounds of drugs sitting on the counter. There's not guns in the open where kids can grab them. There's no excessive damage done to the units. But it also holds us as owners accountable to make sure that we are continuing to provide a high standard of living for our tenants.
Obviously, people don't really understand is that these people have vouchers and they're incentivized to keep these vouchers by keeping the house clean, making their monthly payments, and also having the security of knowing that the government, in some cases, pays the entire rent in full. That's really good, especially when you're in times like, say, COVID, where people didn't have to pay their rent in certain states. Having an opportunity like Section 8 is really going to save you there. So there's a lot of myths, and people are very afraid to get into Section 8 a lot of the time just because they hear all these stories and they have these instant kind of flicks in their head where it's, oh, Section 8, the people are going to treat the homes like trash and things of that nature. But really, I would rather trust a Section 8 tenant than a non-Section 8 tenant all day because they have that voucher and they don't want to lose it. So most of the time, they're going to take care of that house.
I personally own multifamily buildings that have voucher holders, Section 8 tenants, and they are the best tenants I have. The society view of this is that these are terrible people that you don't want living in your backyard. And it's extremely far from the truth. But that is what we have to fight against as a conception of what that is. Everyone in these programs that now have tenants love them. And that's why I said before, your best friend in your backyard, because they've created friendships with people. We have a landlord and an ownership problem. There are not enough people offering housing for voucher holders. And that's why we want to create more people that open their doors or create housing for individuals that have vouchers or lower income to have as they go through life. And that's what we want to solve, is creating more owners, creating more landlords, and creating more affordable housing.
Man, I don't know if it's the fact that I'm accepting tenants in these really nice homes. I don't know, because the neighborhood is also a great area. It's not like their neighbor has a gun and they're coming over and they're just slinging dope and all that. And I think it's like, the saying, you are the average of the 5 people you're around with. Well, if you put somebody that's low income and comes from a bad area, you put them in a nice area, naturally the kids are going to start hanging out with the other kids. They're going to start going to the same schools. They're going to start learning to just be better citizens and contributors to society. But luckily, no bad stories yet. At the end of the day, these people, low income or not, they're still humans. They're still people. They have a right to good housing. They have a right to good education and good opportunities. They're no different than anybody else.
And it's like anything, right? Like you're going to get a mixed bag of people. So in this particular house, 3 out of my tenants, we love them. And one guy, we don't like him that much. Here's the reason why we don't like that particular gentleman. The challenge with him is the lack of communication. This is affordable housing. Like, it's meant to help, not meant to take for you and do for you. It's meant to help accelerate your getting back up on your feet, getting to where you want to be as an individual. So in this house, this particular tenant, he just gives us a little bit of issues when it comes to just not answering the phone, not communicating, making it hard for our contractors to get in if ever there's little work orders, things of that nature. Everybody else, phenomenal inside the home.
I've seen both sides of the coin. Basically, gone into some apartments that I felt like I needed to use a can of Raid on me when I walked out and understand why, okay, that gets the stigma there. Then I've gone into other apartments that were immaculate, just absolutely clean, to people who are just kind and nice, and they're doing their best to survive. And then I realized, there's a difference. What you have to do is you have to find the people that truly need help. When I started digging into Section 8, I started realizing that there's a waiting list for a reason. There's a list of people that really need help. You know the difference between the people. And it's one of those things that I was able to start spotting a lot of that. And I started building relationships with housing development areas, with builders, with other property management companies, finding those spots that either A, could be revitalized, or B, just needed to expand and grow so they can take care of more people. As long as you remember that you put the family first, put the people first, the money will come rushing in. When you start taking care of the people at the people level, then you're always going to have renters. They're going to stay with you because you took care of them. They're going to recommend their friends, their families. They're going to talk good about you to their neighborhood communities that they might belong to, or to civic centers, or to elderly homes, or whatever. The idea behind it is now it's so rare to take care of people. When somebody actually does, it's really something to talk about.